The Battle of Uhud was a significant event in early Islamic history that took place in 625 CE, during the third year of the Hijra migration of Prophet Muhammad and his followers from Mecca to Medina. It was fought between the Muslim forces, led by Prophet Muhammad, and the Quraysh of Mecca, who were seeking to avenge their defeat at the Battle of Badr 6-4 CE. After the Quraysh's defeat at Badr, they sought revenge, as they had lost not only their prestige, but also many important members of their tribe. In response, the Quraysh assembled an army of around 3,000 soldiers, including many experienced warriors, with the goal of confronting the Muslims in Medina. The Prophet Muhammad PBUH and the Muslims, who numbered around 700 men, prepared to defend the city. The two armies met at the foot of Mount Uhud, located about 5 kilometers north of Medina. The battle strategy: the Muslims positioned themselves on a hill at the base of Mount Uhud, with the mountain behind them serving as a natural defense. They also placed 50 archers on a small hill to the rear of the Muslim army, commanded by the young companion Abdullah ibn Zubair. The primary task of these archers was to protect the Muslim army's flank and prevent any cavalry charges from the Quraysh. The Prophet Muhammad PBUH instructed his forces to maintain their positions and not to leave their posts, even if the Muslims began to win, as the Quraysh's cavalry would try to exploit any gaps. His strategy was focused on holding the defensive line, ensuring that the archers protected the rear, and attacking when appropriate. The early stages of the battle: initially, the battle went in favor of the Muslims. The Quraysh army struggled to break through the Muslim defense, and many prominent leaders of the Quraysh, including some of their warriors, were killed. Among the prominent casualties was the Quraysh leader, Abu Jahl, who was killed during the Battle of Badr. This victory started to seem imminent for the Muslims, and the Quraysh began to retreat. The turning point: the cavalry's advantage. At this moment, the Muslim archers, who had been ordered by the Prophet not to leave their post under any circumstances, became tempted by the sight of the Quraysh army retreating. Some of them, led by a group of archers, disregarded the command and left their positions in pursuit of the spoils of war. They believed that the battle was essentially won and that the Quraysh were fleeing. This allowed the Quraysh cavalry, under the leadership of Khalid ibn al-Walid, to seize the opportunity. They attacked the unguarded Muslim flank, catching the Muslim forces by surprise. This change in the tide of battle caused chaos among the Muslims. The Muslim losses: as the Quraysh cavalry charged, the Muslims were forced into disarray. Many of the Muslims, including the Prophet's uncle Hamza ibn Abd al-Muttalib, were martyred. Hamza, a valiant warrior and an important figure in the Muslim community, was killed by Washi ibn Harb, a slave who had been promised his freedom in exchange for killing Hamza. The Prophet Muhammad PBUH himself was wounded in the battle. He was struck by a spear, and his face was injured, with one of his teeth being broken. Despite the intense injuries, he continued to lead his people. The retreat of the Quraysh: though the Quraysh had turned the tide and caused significant casualties among the Muslims, they did not pursue their victory fully. The Quraysh forces, having achieved some of their objectives, began to withdraw. It is said that this retreat was partly due to the fear of a counterattack from the Muslims in Medina, as well as the desire to avoid further casualties. The aftermath: the battle ended with heavy casualties on both sides. The Quraysh had inflicted significant losses on the Muslims, including the deaths of several prominent companions. The Muslims, however, still retained the strategic advantage in Medina and were able to recover and regroup. The loss at Uhud was seen as a trial and a test of faith for the Muslims. Key lessons and teachings. Obedience to command. The battle highlighted the importance of obeying the Prophet's instructions, particularly the command to keep the archers in place when they disobeyed. The consequences were devastating. Test of faith. The Battle of Uhud was also a test of faith for the Muslims. Despite the hardships and losses, the Muslims learned valuable lessons in resilience, faith, and trust in Allah's plan. Martyrdom and sacrifice. The battle is remembered for the martyrdom of several key figures in Islam, especially Hamza ibn Abd al-Muttalib, whose death left a lasting impact on the Muslim community. The role of leadership. The leadership of Prophet Muhammad PBUH during the battle, despite his injuries, exemplified strength, perseverance, and care for his followers. The Battle of Uhud, while a setback for the Muslims, played an important role in shaping the early history of Islam. It was not a decisive defeat, but rather a humbling experience that taught the Muslims valuable lessons in unity, discipline, and trust in divine support. Despite the losses, the battle did not end the Muslim community's strength or resolve. It marked a turning point, with Muslims learning from their mistakes and preparing for future challenges.